What's up, everybody? Kim Becker and Eric Dean here for your weekly AMA for the Colorado Avalanche, who have had several days off. I'm ready for them to get back on the ice. It's been a weird week here in Denver when it comes to pro sports or lack thereof. But, Eric, we definitely have a lot to get to today. A lot of questions from fans. Of course, the trade deadline looming around the corner next week, so we'll get to that one for sure. I think the biggest topic that we want to start this one off with is Cale Makar. He's been in and out of the last several games. You were mentioning offline here that Coach Bednar did give an update, and the media got some insight yesterday that the rest of us might not really know. So can you fill us in on that, please?
Yeah, so Cale Makar a couple weeks ago against the Pittsburgh Penguins, the first game out of the All-Star break, obviously took that hit from Jeff Carter, left with a concussion, came back 4 games later. He took a hit up high, I should say, from Alexei Torpachenko, the Blues, and left that game again, returned in that game again, just like he did against Pittsburgh. And then the next day was experiencing concussion symptoms. So we kind of were a little confused about it. We, talked to Jared yesterday and found out that against the Blues, he was actually not pulled by the independent concussion spotter that sits in every game. It was more because, his visor hit his nose and his nose was bleeding. So they went to repair that. But basically, the whole purpose of yesterday's practice and the update from Cale Makar was to say the Avalanche followed the concussion protocol to a T, and Cale Makar still has a concussion. So there's some questions about how that was all handled, or how it's all laid out, I should say, by the NHL. Any way you cut it, not good news for the Avalanche. Their star defenseman has a concussion. He's got to go through what Jared explained is another 7 days of clearing tests. Okay. So if he comes into the rink Wednesday, which the Avalanche are off for practice, or we're off for practice this morning and won't be practicing, they will return Thursday. If he comes in today and has a headache, the 7 days reset. So he's got to clear 7 days of feeling well. In those 7 days, he can work out. He can take the ice in a non-contact sweater. He can do all that. The first time he was out, it was for 11 days. So that means he was probably feeling symptoms for 3 or 4 days and then cleared everything, returned. Here we go again. So not the greatest news. But again, concussions are hard to predict. This is by no means he's going to be out like Bowen Byram was for 3 or 4 months last year, but we don't know how fast he's going to return or what the situation is there. So it's just something to keep an eye on, because obviously this is not just an Avalanche player. It is, of course, Cale Makar. So we will keep a big eye on that.
Oh my gosh, excuse me, I just sneezed. Sorry, everybody. Okay, this is the athlete in me asking this question, Arif, which is probably not the greatest question, but if he just says he doesn't have a headache, what happens? I mean, are they actually doing like routine protocol pickups?
That's what we were kind of grilling Jared Bednar on yesterday. The media, we asked quite a few questions about this process. And basically what we got was the players do have a say in it, but what they say comes after they clear concussion tests. So they're not asked how they feel until they pass baseline concussion testing. So that was a big one because, we heard against Pittsburgh, Cale Makar returned because he said he was feeling well, but Jared clarified yesterday that he had to pass a baseline concussion test first and then was asked how he felt. So I still have my questions about the process and how it's handled, and if a player should be asked at all how they're feeling. But there's a piece coming out today later on milehighsports.com that's going to kind of further explain that. But in the grand scheme of things, yes, they do have to pass a test before they are asked.
Okay, thank you. That makes me feel a little bit better. Just knowing how some of these athletes are, and especially the professional athletes, they just want to play, man. So if you ask them how they feel, they're going to say anything to get back out there, especially hockey players. I do know that one firsthand. All right, we'll move on to some questions here that were sent in by fans. We'll talk about another key player for the Colorado Avalanche who we have not seen on the ice in a very long time, and we still don't know when the next time we see him out there will be. Gabe Landeskog. Do you think Gabe will be himself come playoff time, or do you think that it will not be enough games to really be fully acclimated?
So if he returns, and I want to specify the word if he's ready to go, if everything goes well. I mean, we all saw the videos of him taking the ice Monday. Very, very, very basic level skating So, he's not close. Like,
Yeah.
usually if let's say a player breaks an ankle and, the timeline is 6 to 8 weeks, when he's on the ice around 4.5, 5 weeks, that you should expect this person to be in the lineup in about a week and a half, as long as there's no setbacks. Gabe Landeskog's situation is different. He is, kind of similar to Darren Helm. He's taking the ice now to see how he feels, to see where they can gauge his progress. So, if he's ready to return, if he's good to go, if he feels fine, I have zero doubt in my mind that he will be himself. And the reason why I say that, again, this is assuming the injury stuff is past him. So now we're just talking rust, shaking off the cobwebs, having not played since June 26th. There is a history of this. In 2020, Nikita Kucherov led the playoffs in points for the Tampa Bay Lightning. They won the Stanley Cup. He missed the entire 2021 regular season. He returned for the 2021 Stanley Cup playoffs, the very first game of the playoffs he played. Having gone from the day they clinched the cup in 2020 to game one of the playoffs in 2021, he did not play an NHL game. Came out in the 2021 playoffs. The Tampa Bay Lightning repeated as cup champs. He once again led the playoffs in points. That was a recent one. But if you want to look back to the last time the Avalanche won a Stanley Cup, the last time they had a Swede that was one of their superstars, in 2001, they won the Stanley Cup. Peter Forsberg was out after the second round against LA, did not play in the Western Conference Final, did not play in the Stanley Cup Final. This one's a little bit more impressive, and I'll tell you why. He missed the entire 2022 regular season. He returned for game one of the 2002, not 2022, 2002 playoffs. After not having played since the 2001 playoffs, he returned for game one of the 2002 playoffs. The reason why it's more impressive when Peter Forsberg did it is because, like Kucherov, Peter Forsberg led the league in playoff points in 2002. The difference is the Avalanche didn't even play in the Stanley Cup Final that year. So they went 3 rounds deep, and Forsberg still led the playoffs in points. So there has been in the last 20 years, those are 2 examples. I'm sure there are others that I'm not remembering, but as long as the injuries are aside, and as long as the injuries are past Gabe Landeskog, there is a history of players returning and being themselves in the playoffs. Someone like Gabe Landeskog, we know how competitive a guy he is. He is still well in the prime age of his career. He's 30 years old. He's ready to rock and roll. He's in good spirits. We saw him at the ice rink on Sunday after that game against the Edmonton Oilers. He is the same bubbly Landeskog as usual. If he is able to return for the playoffs, or even before, let's say he returns for the last few games of the regular season, as long as he's ready to go, game one of the playoffs, and the injuries are past him, which even last year they weren't, and he was still effective, expect him to be the tenacious, aggressive, competitive Gabe Landeskog that he usually is. If the injuries are past him. That's the biggest caveat in this whole thing.
I was going to say, good to hear, but yeah, a big emphasis on that if is still what's looming there, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, that would be a very good addition to have back in the lineup for the end of this season here. So we'll see how that one goes. Continue to monitor that, of course. Now we'll move on here. What is having possibly $22.5 million on an LTIR, long-term injury reserve, mean? I know they'd have to make trades, but is anyone fair game with all of that money, Arif?
So I'm going to do a very brief explanation of what LTIR is. Number one, it stands for long-term injury reserve. It's when an NHL player is obviously going to be out for a very long time. You can stick him on LTIR. He can sit there for the entire season if he's not going to return at all, or he can sit there until the playoffs if he's set to return in the playoffs. Now, the 22.5 that this question is referring to is it's really 22 because Erik Johnson makes 6, Cale Makar makes 9, Gabe Landeskog makes 7. Crunch it all up together, it's $22 million. Now, here's the way LTIR works as it pertains to the salary cap. There is no salary cap in the playoffs. Once you get to the first day of the Stanley Cup playoffs, salary cap no longer matters. So if you know Erik Johnson or Gabe Landeskog or Cale Makar are not going to return until the playoffs, you can put them on LTIR. You can use, let's say, Gabe Landeskog, $7 million, and go out and trade for another $7 million forward. A lot of money. Like that could be a very valuable piece added to your lineup. Then when the playoffs begin, you activate Gabe Landeskog, you're $7 million over the cap, but cap doesn't matter, so it no longer matters. Now, here is the biggest thing to take from that. Cale Makar will likely the expectation, knock on wood, is he will be back before the playoffs. The expectation of Gabe Landeskog is he will be back before the playoffs. So you don't want to go using Cale Makar's $9 million to bring in another $9 million player. And then in mid-April or early April, you're ready for Cale to return, and you can't activate him off LTIR because you need to, somehow shed $9 million, but the trade deadline is passed, so you can't. Then the NHL is going to investigate you. Then you're pretty much over the salary cap. It's a whole thing. The only player that this actually pertains to is Eric Johnson.
Okay.
Eric Johnson, we found out on Sunday, broke his ankle. He's going to be out 6 to 8 weeks. Is usually not that the Avalanche gave that timeline. That's me giving my own timeline, because that's usually what it takes for an NHL player to recover from a broken ankle, is about 6 to 8 weeks. We are about 6 to 8 weeks from the playoffs. So if the Avalanche, again, you have to make a trade for it to work. So you have to actually have the assets to make a deal, which is a whole nother thing. But if the Avalanche want to use an extra $6 million, there's another player they want to bring in, they can put Eric Johnson on LTIR, knowing very well he will not play another regular season game when the salary cap matters. They can go out and trade for someone, fill that cap space, and then activate EJ for the playoffs if he's ready to go. So that's the only one that I could see as a possibility, because the Avalanche still expect Gabe Landeskog to play this regular season. We'll see if that has changed in the last couple of weeks, but I've not heard otherwise. And Cale Makar with a concussion, again, he could be back in a week. He could be back in a month. You're not going to go and risk, potentially being stuck in a situation where you cannot activate Cale.
Okay, well, you kind of answered the second half of this next question here by the question is, do you see them adding another depth defenseman with EJ out? But the beginning of this question is, do you see the Avs trading for Adam Henrique? So a little specific there. What do you think about this one? And obviously just elaborate on kind of the second part of that question if you can.
Okay, yes, let's start with the first one. So centerman on the market. Bo Horvat traded to the Islanders, signed an extension. Ryan O'Reilly traded to the Toronto Maple Leafs. Also, Elliot Friedman of Sportsnet, the insider, confirmed that the Avalanche were asking about Ryan O'Reilly. So there was a little bit of a hint of a potential reunion there. Ryan O'Reilly gets dealt. Jonathan Taves announces that he's dealing with long COVID. He's got a lot of immune diseases. He's not going to get traded this year. Yeah. Sean Monahan, another possible trade deadline rental centerman, has not played a game since December 5th. He returned to practice Saturday. He did not practice Monday. He's not healthy, and the Avalanche are not going to trade for him unless he plays a few games between now and March 3rd, which is 9 days away. That brings us to pretty much all of the rental centermen. That covers it all. Who can play a second-line center? Now you're starting to look at guys with term. The top one on my list is exactly the one we're being asked about, is Adam Henrique. Okay. Adam Henrique left Tuesday's game with an injury. We don't know the extent of it. He could very well play in Anaheim's next game. But that's another name you have to kind of keep an eye on. Is Adam Henrique going to be healthy and ready to go? We don't know. If he is, Adam Henrique is a 33-year-old who's producing well for the Anaheim Ducks this year and has produced well every single season of his career, minus the lockout shortened season. Has been a very good contributor. In his rookie year in 2012, him and the New Jersey Devils went all the way to the Stanley Cup final against him and the Devils went all the way to the Stanley Cup final and lost to the LA Kings. He also had a Game 7 overtime winner in round 1. He's got some clutch scoring ability. He's a good two-way centerman. He's a good veteran. He played with Josh Manson a year ago and for the last few years. If the Avalanche trade for him, you'll want Anaheim to eat a little bit of the cap space because he's under contract for next year as well. So that will solve your 2C center issue this year and next year. It'll cost you quite a bit because you get 2 playoff runs out of him. But the biggest caveat is, will Adam Henrique be healthy after that injury on Tuesday? We don't know yet. We're going to find out here soon. So if he's healthy, if the Anaheim Ducks are willing to eat a little bit of cap space, if they don't ask for Alex Newhook, which I don't think they will, I could see the Avalanche going for him. But it all starts with the health. Interesting. Now, second part of the question is the depth defenseman thing. With Eric Johnson out, there was a couple questions. There was one that asked if they're going to get another right-hand defenseman, another depth defenseman. So I'll kind of crunch it all together and say, I think so, because I think even before the EJ injury, the Avalanche have their 5 horses. They have Makar and Taves, Byram and Manson, Sam Girard. Eric Johnson is the clear-cut number 6, and then they have a little bit of a gap, and the clear-cut 7 and 8 are Engelland and Brad Hunt. Mm-hmm. Even without Eric Johnson hurt, even with that top 6 all healthy, there is still a little bit of we're one injury away from not looking too good. Now, Eric Johnson's already hurt. So if he misses the beginning part of the playoffs, and then let's say Sam Girard gets hurt day to day, well, now you have both Brad Hunt and Andreas Englund in the lineup, and that's probably not what you want. So the Avalanche, I would suspect, will bring in a depth defenseman, not the Josh Manson caliber that we saw a season ago at the trade deadline, but maybe more of a depth guy, similar to what they did with the Andrew Cogliano deal at forward. So a name that sticks out to me, this is just one name, for example, also a right-hand defenseman because EJ plays the right side, like Cale Makar and Josh Manson. One that sticks out to me is Scott Mayfield of the New York Islanders. He's someone that a lot of teams love. He's also 30 years old. He's played all 60 games this year, well over 20 minutes. He was a beast in the playoffs for the Islanders in both COVID seasons in 2020 and 2021 when the Islanders went 3 rounds deep, playing 25, 26, sometimes 28 minutes against the Tampa Bay Lightning both years in the Eastern Conference Final. So that's somebody that I can see. I remember he even scored a big goal in that game 6 against Tampa in 2021. So he's got some playoff pedigree to him. He's only 30 years old. That's a guy that I could see. He will cost a little bit. He's not going to be cheap, but that's a guy that I can see the Avalanche bringing in to shore up that right side.
Okay, a lot of names there, Era. If you've done your research, this is great. I hope everybody listening is taking notes because we've got only one more after this to talk about the trade deadline and who the Avs may trade for. So this is all really good stuff. We've got 2 more questions before we wrap up this week's version of our Colorado Avalanche AMA. And the second to last one is, how likely do you think we are to see Jack Johnson return less than a year after leaving?
So Jack Johnson plays the left side, but I've been saying it since training camp. The Avalanche wanted to re-sign him. Yeah. The Avalanche wanted to bring him back. The only reason why that didn't end up happening is, number one, Jack Johnson doesn't make a lot of money. He doesn't make a lot of money with the Blackhawks. He didn't with the Avalanche. And the only reason why the Avalanche didn't re-sign him is because everything was in limbo with the Nazem Kadri situation for well over a month, where they couldn't afford to add a player until they had figured out their other things. But on the Jack Johnson side of things, you cannot wait. If you get an offer day one of free agency and you are a fringe defenseman like Jack is, you cannot risk the possibility of not having a deal come start of the regular season. Because last year he didn't have a deal. He had to join the Avalanche on a PTO. He made the team. He won the cup. Like, perfect season, perfect ending to what was a little bit of a struggle and maybe a concern and anxiousness in September of 2021 when he had to join the Avs on a tryout. So because of that, because of all of that, he had to sign that deal with the Blackhawks. But I think the Avalanche will circle back. He won't cost much, if anything, if not a 7th or a 6th rounder, maybe just future considerations. The Avalanche like him. Yeah. Was he that effective last year? No, but he's a guy, he's a body, and that's what you need. Like I said, you're one injury away from having both Englund and Hunt in the lineup right now. Jack Johnson's an extra body. I can see the Avalanche very much going after him, bringing him in to be that depth defenseman. He is a left-handed defenseman. That's the thing to keep in mind is, that the Scott Mayfield name comes as an idea of replacing Eric Johnson if you're worried he's going to be out for a little bit. Jack Johnson comes in as that depth guy that could step in when you get an injury, just like a season ago when Sam Girard broke his sternum. Jack Johnson stepped in and played the rest of the playoffs.
Okay. All right. Who's your out of left field potential trade deadline acquisition for the Avs? And this person, 4th overall, says, I'm still rooting for Larkin.
Larkin, I think he's going to re-sign with the Red Wings. I still can't see him going anywhere. He has played his entire career in Michigan. He was born in Michigan. He grew up in the Michigan system. He played for all of the Michigan programs. He played, I believe, for, if I'm not mistaken, the U.S. National Development Program, which is based in Plymouth, Michigan. Every time I go home to visit family, I drive by that arena. People love it there. So he is a Michigan guy through and through, drafted by the Red Wings. I just can't possibly see him moving on because of an extra $100,000 a year on an 8-year contract. Totally. Like, this is not Nazem Kadri, where the Avalanche were offering 4 years at a lesser number than other teams are offering 7, where Kadri's leaving 24-25 million on the table to stay. This is leaving 1 or 2 million on the table, which, a lot of money still, but a lot easier to fathom if you're a player like Larkin as compared to what Kadri had to deal with. So I just can't see Larkin being an option. The 2 names that stick out to me, number 1 is Boone Jenner. That's someone that I've talked about before. He's under contract for a few more years. Similar to Adam Henrique, he would be a guy the Avalanche bring in with term. He only makes 3.75 and can fill the 2C role. And if Alex Newhook steps up in the 2C role over the next 2 or 3 seasons that you have Boone Jenner under contract, then Boone can just slot in as the 3rd center, because more than likely you're losing JT Compher this year. He's just playing so well. He's going to get a big contract and he deserves it. So Boone Jenner's the first one that sticks out to me. The second one, if you want way out of left field, no rumors of him being traded. He probably won't be traded. It's the Arizona Coyotes centerman, Nick Schmaltz. Okay. He's under contract for a very long time. He's got, I think, 4 or 5 years at like $5.8 million. He is young. He's a really great centerman. He puts up a ton of points. He's been a point per game for the Coyotes over the last couple of years, and he's only 26 years old. So he would be an ideal second line center. The only thing is you would need the Coyotes to both eat a bunch of money off of it, and you would need to have the package needed to acquire him, which, given what guys like Brandon Hagel were traded for last year, the Avalanche would literally have to give up like 3 first-rounders to get Nick Schmaltz, and that's with Arizona eating money. So I just can't see it happening, but that's the dream scenario, if you want to call it that, the way out of left field one. Boone Jenner's a little bit more reasonable, because even if the Columbus Blue Jackets don't want to eat money, 3.75 is reasonable for the Avs to handle. 5.8, 5.9 for Nick Schmaltz, not as much. Obviously, Schmaltz is worth 5.8, 5.9. The Avs just don't have the cap space to make it work unless you're trading out this summer a Sam Girard or something, which, could be a possibility. You never know. So those are the 2 names that stick out to me. I think if the Avalanche trade for a centerman, which at this point, who knows, they might just roll with JT Compher and shore up the wing and the D. The 3 names that stick out to me right now are obviously Adam Henrique if he's healthy, Boone Jenner if he's available, and Nick Schmaltz is your way out of left field, like foul ball all the way down the road kind of pick.
All right, cool. Okay, Eric. Well, thank you so much. We'll have one more of these before the trade deadline next Friday. So we'll have one more AMA next Wednesday. So I'm sure we'll have some more updates and maybe some more names to chat about here. But I appreciate your time. To everybody tuning in, thank you so much. We've got some exciting things coming for the Colorado Avalanche. Hopefully no more injuries, however, but some exciting things hopefully to talk about next week before that trade deadline on Friday. So Eric, thank you so much. To everybody listening, thank you so much. And we will see you next week.